One of the most notable weather phenomena that is often thrown around during the winter is a blizzard. They're known as ferocious snowstorms that you absolutely do not want to be outside in. But what exactly are blizzards, and what are some of the most notable ones throughout history? Now, before we get into that, I would appreciate you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. So, what exactly is a blizzard? Well, contrary to popular belief, it has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of snow that falls during a storm. Rather, there are two major conditions a storm must meet to be classified as a blizzard: high winds paired with low visibility. According to the U.S. National Weather Service, a storm is classified as a blizzard when it produces wind speeds greater than 35 miles per hour or 56 kilometers per hour, with visibility dropping to 0.25 miles or 400 meters or less. In addition, these conditions need to be met for at least 3 hours, which is long enough to rule out other weather phenomena like snow squalls, which may produce similar conditions over a far shorter time frame. Interestingly, these criteria means it's technically possible for a blizzard to happen without it snowing at all, something that can happen when high winds lift loose snow and ice off the ground in an area already covered with snow and creates rolling clouds that cause low visibility and dangerous conditions. Real blizzards in the United States tend to form when warm air from the Gulf of Mexico meets cold air coming down from Canada and combines with a storm system moving off of the Rocky Mountains. This temperature gradient causes extreme winds and precipitation, which combined with the relatively flat terrain of the Great Plains and Midwest can cause some seriously treacherous conditions. In the most extreme cases, something known as a whiteout can happen, where it can be impossible to see your own hand stretch out in front of you, and it becomes possible to get lost within your own front yard. So, now that we know what a blizzard is, what are some of the most notable ones? Well, let's start off with something way back in the 19th century, the so-called Children's Blizzard of 1888. This storm happened when yet another storm moved off of the Rocky Mountains into the Great Plains. Interestingly enough, in the lead up to the actual blizzard, temperatures rose drastically to levels not usually seen in the northern Great Plains during early January. As a result, many people, including children being taught in one room schoolhouses at the time, went outside to enjoy the unseasonably warm weather. Unfortunately for all of these people, however, the blizzard struck with sudden force, catching thousands of people outside in the aforementioned whiteout conditions that make a blizzard so dangerous. This, as you can probably expect, ended a complete and utter disaster. Thanks in large part to being stranded in the snowstorm, as well as the ensuing bone-chilling temperatures, at least 235 people died, with some people putting the toll as high as 1,000. The reason why this is known as the children's blizzard is because children made up the majority of people who went outside to enjoy warm weather preceding the storm, and with little to no warning beforehand, those who weren't already inside got stranded. An extremely unfortunate situation, but in an era before satellites and computers could semi-reliably predict what the weather was going to be like days in advance, it's not exactly unexpected. Moving on, our next major blizzard happened an entire 2 months later, in March 1888. Yup, 1888 has two major blizzards we're talking about. Unlike the children's blizzard, however, this blizzard primarily impacted the northeastern US. You see, the main storm type that impacts this area of the continent is what's known as a nor'easter, which are storms that sit off of the New England coast. These storms form in a very similar manner with a clash between warm and cold air, and thus tend to produce very similar impacts to storms in the Great Plains. In the case of this storm, there was once again unusually mild weather preceding it, but it was also raining, so the incentive to go outside and enjoy the warmth wasn't there. What's notable about this storm, however, was the sheer amount of snow that fell and how it pretty much paralyzed the Northeast. An estimated 50 plus inches, or 130 centimeters of snow, was estimated to have fallen in parts of Connecticut and Massachusetts over the span of less than 48 hours. Snowfall rates that are almost unheard of, even in places like the Rockies and Cascades, where heavy snow is common, let alone the New England coast. And this wasn't localized either. Pretty much the entire Northeast, from New York all the way to Boston and northern Vermont, was buried in at least a couple feet of snow. As a result, transportation of any kind was completely shut down for days, and telegraph lines became inoperable as well. As a result, the storm provided the catalyst to build subway and telegraph lines underground, which would make dealing with the aftermath of such snowstorms much easier. The New York Stock Exchange, aka Wall Street, was shut down for 2 full days, something that didn't happen again for over 120 years. The death toll was once again immense, with an estimated 400 deaths due to the storm and ensuing cold temperatures, about 100 of which were due to sailors whose ships got destroyed in the storm. Now, let's say the most insane out of all these storms for last, with 1993's so-called Storm of the Century. On the surface, this storm is just like all the other storms I've covered so far, being a mid-latitude storm that brought snow, wind, and cold temperatures to a wide swath of the United States. What was unusual about the storm, however, was where some of that snow and cold went. Feet of snow were drops not just in the usual suspects of the Great Lakes and Northeastern states, but also in the highly unusual states of Alabama and Georgia. Getting significant snow accumulation in the Deep South is already incredibly rare owing to their warmer and more humid climate overall. But to see it as late as mid-March, when things usually start warming up, was unprecedented. Because the snow hit such an unprepared region, the destruction was once again immense, with numerous reports of collapsed roofs, walls being blown in, and windows breaking due to the intense snow and wind. Even the Florida Panhandle saw several inches of snow, and areas further south in Florida that escaped snow instead had to deal with multiple tornadoes. In total, 318 people died due to the storm, and while most of that was expectedly from the extreme snow and cold, some were actually from storm surge that flooded coastal areas in the Gulf of Mexico thanks to the hurricane force winds that the storm produced. One more mind-boggling statistic. Despite the nation's power grid having advanced quite a bit from the 19th century blizzards we covered earlier, this storm was still strong enough to knock out power to over 10 million people, and in total, it caused several billion US dollars in damages. And on that positive note, that's all I have to talk about concerning blizzards. As always, I'd appreciate if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. Thanks and have a great day.